Presumed New Orleans Saints head coach Kellen Moore's offense is a blend of different schemes, which may be exactly what this team needs. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a deeper dive into Kellen Moore and his offense, how it will benefit players or could benefit players like Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave, who should be the biggest focal points for the New Orleans Saints pending their offseason additions. We'll also kick everything off here with taking a look at what exactly Kellen Moore's offense is, because truly it doesn't have a single name. It's a blend of different offenses, which could be perfect for the New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, for making us your first listen and for being an everyday or here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at Prize Picks. Go and check out our crossover Thursdays presented by Prize Picks with our friends over at Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Eagles. Remember, you can use the promo code Locked On NFL on your Prize Picks app to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. The New Orleans Saints are expected to hire Kellen Moore, Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator, as their next head coach. And when trying to kind of nail down what kind of offense he has and speaking with him about it and all these things, he kind of referenced something that we've been talking about for a couple weeks here on the show, which is that he doesn't really necessarily have an offense that has a name, right? Oh, the Shanahan offense or the wide zone offense or the West Coast offense or the Air Coryell offense. It's kind of this interesting blend that's completely based on what the talent over on the offensive side does. And so for me, I think the thing that's really interesting about that is that it kind of reminds me, and again, I hate to keep evoking this name because with this name comes expectation, but it reminds me of Sean Payton. Sean Payton came in with sort of this blend of West Coast and Air Coryell, which hadn't really been something that was on the scene at the time that was being done the way that it was being done. Stretching offenses horizontally so that you could take advantage of what they're doing vertically has always been kind of the lifeblood of the NFL when it comes to the passing game. But Sean Payton's way of doing it, the passing game is the extension of the run game. 6 offensive linemen on the run game, establishing the run, but then also being able to kind of take advantage of these crossers, pre-snap checks, all these other things. There's a lot of stuff that Sean Payton did that we saw other teams start to echo. Sean Payton was kind of the Kyle Shanahan of today, of then, right? Or the Sean McVay of today, of then. So I think looking at where Kellen Moore could potentially end up finding his way in the NFL as a head coach is that he doesn't have to blend his offense to what the head coach's vision is. We've seen that with Mike McCarthy. We saw that with him when he was calling over in with the Chargers over in Los Angeles. And then now we see sort of this run heavy version that's being called over in Philadelphia, which is a part of A, the personnel, B, what's working against the defenses, and then C, what supports your quarterback the best. But it's also a reflection of what it is that Nick Sirianni kind of has his fingerprints on as well, because Sirianni kind of has some ways and things and principles, tenets, pillars, if you will, that he likes to execute over on offense. And Kellen Moore sees it as his responsibility to make sure that he's executing those things in that vision. So when we spoke to him about like, how do you highlight your offense? What is it? It really kind of comes down for him to what personnel he has, which could be a major benefit for New Orleans because they're going to have one set of personnel in 2025, a slightly different personnel in 2026, and then perhaps an entirely different personnel or a massively different personnel come 2027. And so with those 3 adjustments likely on the way, or 3 adjustment years likely on the way, you want to make sure that you have somebody that's able to kind of fine tune and adjust based upon what personnel is available to them in those individual years. Now, the other piece, as we discussed in our live show yesterday, which was from Sports Drink over Uptown at 1042 Toledano Drive, was this idea that you have to be able to not only have the talent, but also keep the talent healthy. That doesn't have a lot to do with Kellen Moore, although maybe having the guys warm up is probably a good idea before practices. And so I think finding out kind of where Kellen Moore's focus is with the personnel is going to be really interesting. It's going to be a fun conversation every year because I think it's going to change. And then I also asked him for a week-to-week basis how much it changes based on the defense that he's playing up against. You remember in press conferences with Clint Kubiak and Dennis Allen that they would oftentimes talk about like, well, we do what we do best and we're not really worried about what it is that they do over on the other side. So they didn't do a lot of adjusting to what specifically the other team presented as a challenge, or at least that was the public line, right? What they did is what they did. But certainly when you watch these games, you saw a lack of ability to adjust in game as well as a lack of ability to adjust week to week. And so Kellen Moore went on to say not only does he adjust his offense based on the personnel that he has, but he's going to adjust his offense and adjust his game plan based upon what the opposing defense does. And so finding ways to be able to attack what a defense struggles at while protecting yourself from the things that defenses are good at, those are the things that this offense will be predicated on. So you're getting back to being matchup based as opposed to just trying to strong arm your system into working, right? It's Mean Girls trying to make fetch happen. Like it was that kind of a thing. But instead now you're looking at the ability to pivot, the ability to adjust, the ability to diagnose what's going to happen. And this is going to come down to film study, preparation, all that. The ability to diagnose what's going to happen in your preparation and then adjust your attack based on that. I think that's something that the New Orleans Saints can benefit from. And that would be slightly different from what it is that they've done over the course of the past couple of years. And look, Kellen Moore is really interesting, right? You speak with him and you know that he just came out of this or is still a part of this Philadelphia Eagles offense, which, was at near the top of the league in rushing, near the top of the league in rushing attempts, but was 29th in the NFL in passing attempts. And you ask Kellen Moore, like, what would his offense be? And he tells you that he'd throw the ball every down. And so it just goes to show you that even sometimes he has the ability to work against what it is that he has the natural inclination to do based upon him having a great offensive line in Philadelphia, him having a phenomenal running back in Saquon Barkley. The ability to be able to say, this is what I want to do, but I don't have the personnel to do that. But I do have the personnel that does this really well. So let me do this. So the three things that I'm highlighting here is that he's able to kind of get over his ego and his pride in terms of what it is that he wants to do with his offense based upon what it is that the offense can do. He builds something that adjusts and changes based upon what he's about to see. So preparation wise, about to see from the defense. And he adjusts and builds based on what it is that his team and his personnel can support and does well. I think that's a pretty good start. Is it guaranteed to work right away? No, probably not. But nothing's guaranteed. But that doesn't mean that it won't work right away either, right? So we'll see where things go. But just a little bit of a look at what is an interesting kind of approach on offense. It should be very, very different than what we've seen here in New Orleans over the course of the past few years. Coming up next, how this offensive scheme and system works is all going to be about how it benefits the biggest names. And two of the biggest names going from 2024 to 2025, at least right now, are running back Alvin Kamara and wide receiver Chris Olave. And both have the ability to benefit from Kellen Moore's offense. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp Therapy Online is awesome, and it's been really, really helpful to me. I've been doing therapy since the pandemic, and right now we're in the midst of the second month of the year. So going back to January 1st, started with 365 blank pages. How do you want to fill them out? How do you want to write your story? That's the type of stuff that therapy kind of helps you figure out, right? You want to write the best parts. You want to overcome some of the most challenging parts, all those things. Like you're able to write your own future, write your own path. And that's something that therapy and BetterHelp can absolutely help you out with after they get you matched up with a licensed therapist, after you take a questionnaire, get you somebody that's already kind of connected to what it is that maybe you're experiencing or has a similar background, all these other things, and free to change at any time as well. So write your story today with BetterHelp. Just visit betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's going to get you 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, and our official sports betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The Super Bowl 59 is right around the corner. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, especially over at FanDuel today, whether you're betting on what's going to happen with the who's going to score the first touchdown, what's going to happen on the first drive, betting on the coin toss, the color of the Gatorade at the end of the game. You can even bet on whether or not Lane Johnson scores a touchdown with plus 10,000 odds. There's a ton of stuff to get in on. We like to call Super Bowl betting Christmas because there's so much fun stuff. So you can check it all out by either downloading the FanDuel Sportsbook app, which is super easy to navigate, very easy to use, all that. Or you can head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. And new users get it even better. So download that app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started and just put $5 down. If you win, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's over at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Doing a quick episode for you this morning. We had our live show from Sports Drink yesterday. Make sure you go and check that out. In that one, we broke down why the New Orleans Saints might be close to hiring a head coach, but that doesn't mean that they're ready to compete right away. Getting the head coach right, getting the quarterback right, and making sure that the right GM is making the right decisions are all a part of what it takes to become future contenders in the coming years. So we dove into all of that in yesterday's episode. If you missed it, make sure you go and check that out. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to share some of the clips that I have from Radio Row, including Kellen Moore, Blake Groupie, and more in terms of folks we were able to grab while we were out at Radio Row and everything. But mostly I want to just continue discussing because as we enter Friday, we kind of enter the final hours of the Kellen Moore saga, as Kellen Moore is expected to become the New Orleans Saints head coach. So we're going to discuss a bunch of that stuff in tomorrow's show. And I want to get into how many years Demario Davis said he's going to play and wants to continue his career. So we got all that coming up for you tomorrow. Today here, I want to wrap up with a look at the two names on the offense right now, that I think stand to benefit the most and need to benefit the most in order for Kellen Moore's first year to be a success. Now, what is it that creates success in the first year of Kellen Moore's tenure? You got to win more than 5 games, right? I don't really look at this team and say, well, there's a team there that this is a team that's got to get to the playoffs. That's going to depend on what their offseason acquisitions look like, how their division plays, injuries, all those other things. I'm not worried about that right now for them. The biggest thing is, can you actually improve, look more cohesive, adjust to your opponent, kind of do some of the not intangible, but do some of the things on the field that make the team look better, that help the team perform better, that help the team not be bad and boring, like all those other things, right? That's the nightmare of the NFL, is to be bad and boring. And so can you avoid all of that? And can you make the right coaching staff hire? So those are the things that I'm going to be looking at that kind of gauge success for Kellen Moore in his first year. Over the course of a tenure, got to bring home a chip. If you're not bringing home a chip, if you're not winning, you're losing. So that's got to be the bigger conversation in terms of the overall tenure of Kellen Moore, or whoever the New Orleans Saints next head coach is going to be. Heavy air quotes to that. But for 2025, you just want to see cohesion. And when I say cohesion, I mean cohesion amongst the unit, not cohesion with past years. You want to see the ability to be able to adjust, to be fluid, and to be able to elevate your playmakers on both offense and defense. But Kellen Moore's fingerprints will be mostly on the offensive side. And so for me, two guys that will be the gauge: Alvin Kamara, New Orleans Saints running back, and then wide receiver Chris Olave. Alvin Kamara had a fantastic 2024 season. 950 rushing yards, was 50 rushing yards away from his first 1,000 rushing yard season, missed 3 games on the year. And so if he would have been able to play those 3 games, he probably would have gotten to that point. But he was also in striking distance the last couple of games that he played. So maybe we can go either way on that. But I still think that the one thing that Clint Kubiak did really well and consistently well was utilize Alvin Kamara in a way that maximizes his ability. Get him out in space, get the ball in his hands, get blockers out in front of him, all those good things. He did really, really well in all that. The issue is that Clint Kubiak's offense became very one approach, one note, one trick pony type stuff. Wide zone, wide zone, wide zone, wide 9 run, getting all these runs towards the outside and not being able to counteract and counterpunch with something that was in the middle of the field. And so I think those are the things that you're looking at, wanting to see how are those pieces of what made Alvin Kamara look really, really good in 2024 replicated in 2025, but also better complemented in 2025. I think that that's one thing that New Orleans didn't do particularly well, was complement the success that they were finding by running outside. They kind of found that success and then said, well, we'll just keep doing that until we're successful at it again, which clearly was not the greatest approach when it came to the way that they ended up kind of approaching all of this. So that's got to be a big piece to this as well, is not just how do you maximize the players individually, but also how is it that you end up maximizing the complement that ends up helping out what it is that you want to do. So those are going to be kind of the biggest things that I'm looking for. You know, you look at outside zone runs this year, New Orleans 86.7% towards the outside and only 13.3% towards the inside. Now that's not as large a split as San Francisco, as Atlanta, and as Pittsburgh, but all three of those teams didn't have really that kind of counterpunch towards the inside. So you'd like to see them develop that. And New Orleans, though, faced only 6.7% on the season on the offensive side, stacked boxes. And so the inability to be able to run inside was not because the defense was necessarily taking it away from you. It just wasn't a part of your game plan. So can you adjust that? And can you put Alvin Kamara in better situations where not only is he winning on the outside, but you're setting up the ability to win on the inside, which then kind of condenses that defense a little bit, kind of gets the defense off balance a little bit, and then you're able to take advantage of that. And then how do you utilize Alvin Kamara a little bit better in the passing game and all those other things, particularly out in space, whether it's getting him out of the backfield, utilizing him out of the slot, moving him around a little bit more like those 2017, 18, 19, 20 days and everything. Does he have the ability to still do that? You got to find all this stuff out. And then where do you find that complement, whether it's through the draft, through free agency, or already on the roster? And then how do you keep all of that healthy? Those are going to be the big questions. But I do think that Alvin Kamara stands to continue to benefit from being a big-time focus in the game or in the offensive game plan when it comes to Kellen Moore. Look at what Kellen Moore has done with Saquon Barkley. I'm not saying that Alvin Kamara is about to run for 2,000 yards, but what I am saying is that Kellen Moore was able to look at Saquon Barkley and say, hey, he did this well, right? Inside zone run, all the things that he does really well. And then he maximized that. Similar thing with Alvin Kamara. What is it that he does well? Gets the ball in his hands in the passing game, outside zone run, all these other pieces. How do you maximize that? And so I think that becomes the big thing. And then Chris Olave becomes really interesting because his ability to succeed is going to be completely contingent upon the role that he's asked to play. Is he asked to play the X receiver role again? I don't think that would be the ideal situation. I think you go and find the big body to line up on the outside and be like the big bodied guy, the X receiver, the quintessential one. But then you use Chris Olave more like a Devonta Smith. Somebody that's a little bit more of a complementary, lining up off the line of scrimmage. I mean, you don't necessarily have to line him up off the line of scrimmage. Chris Olave is great playing through press coverage and everything. And so finding ways to complement him and utilize him kind of like what you see with Devonta Smith, which is a lot of kind of quick breaking, in breaking routes, but also challenging down the field and all these other things. I think that that role works really well. It looks like it could work really well, not only for Chris Olave, but you can move Chris Olave around and utilize Rashid Shaheed in those situations too. So I think that though the gauge of success in the offense is going to come down to, depending upon who's added over the course of the offseason, this changes if a Teteroa McMillan ends up getting drafted, then obviously he becomes the focus of the passing game as the number one guy. And then Chris Olave serves that complementary role. But I still think even in that case, if he's playing the Devonta Smith role, if you're able to maximize him that way, and you're able to get Alvin Kamara in places where he's able to have a bigger impact, that's going to be the measure of success. So if you can get Alvin Kamara close to 1,000 yards again, and if you can get Chris Olave, if he's able to, depending upon how his health and everything looks going into the year, if you can get him close to, let's call it 900, 800, or even back to 1,000 yards receiving, depending on if he's playing a primary role or a complementary role, then I think that's your measure for success. And if Kellen Moore is able to do that, that's a massive benefit for Alvin Kamara. That's a massive benefit for Chris Olave. And that's a huge win for the future of the New Orleans Saints as things continue to change, rebuild, and kind of retool, and hopefully continue to improve as they move forward. All right, y'all, coming up in tomorrow's episode, stuff from Radio Row, how much longer Demario Davis wants to play, and more on Kellen Moore. We got all that coming up for you in tomorrow's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me in the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.